Say, got it, and you should just click got it.
Okay.
Hello, everyone on YouTube. Hi, everyone on Zoom. Oh, you have some Lake Watch friends on Zoom, maybe?
Yeah.
All right. Hey, Mark Hoyer, how's it going? If you're on Zoom and you can hear, give us a
Yeah, I
thumbs
hear you.
up. All right.
Yep, we can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. All right.
Oh, thanks, Mark, for coming.
All right. One more. Got it. Door closed. Lights out. And almost. All right, thanks everyone. Welcome to our next Water, Wetlands, and Watershed seminar. Today we're lucky enough to have Dr. Weizhu Wang. She is an assistant professor in the Food and Resources Economics Department here at UF. And she specializes, her research program in particular specializes in environmental and natural resources economics. So something that's been done a lot here in this room over previous decades. Valuation of ecosystem services and water policy. She also has a robust extension program looking to identify solutions for water resources issues in Florida. They're not just driven by biology and physics, but also by policy and sort of human behavior. Her research program highlights interactions among humans and natural systems, especially the economic valuation of Florida water resources. So Dr. Wang, it's a pleasure to have you here. I'll let the last people in the room and then get this going here. Submit. All right, you should be good to go.
Well, thanks, David. Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here and especially to talk about the lakes. And I really like. So my talk is titled "Coupling Nature and Human Models in the Context of Lake Ecosystems." So I love freshwater lakes. I think you guys also like it. So we can have so much fun with the lakes, like kayak, like swimming, like the bird watching. But sometimes the algae blooms in the lakes will make us very unpleasant. So for my entire talk, the project I'm going to talk about is centered around one research question. So I'm thinking about how do people, like the human decisions, affect the lakes they love, and then how do those lakes inspire people to make actions. If we think carefully, actually, humans and lakes, they are interconnected. Starting from this side, the land use and management decisions, along with the hydrological process, will affect the water quality and the water quantity of the lakes. And then it will affect the ecosystem services we perceive. The ecosystem services change will lead to economic decisions and behavioral adjustments, which would affect the collective actions in the region. And then those collective actions will bring changes to the policies and also further behavioral changes, which would potentially affect the land use and the management decisions. So in this project, we see the interactions of the humans and the lakes is a feedback process. And we're trying to use different models across different disciplines to analyze the whole interactive feedback process. And this is the model framework we have. So to model in the agroecosystems, we bring together the economic optimization model, which is designed by economists, with the nutrient cycling model, which is led by our agronomists and the environment engineering in the team. So the relationship between these two models, I will talk more later, but the relationship is the nutrient cyclings will affect the crop yields of different crops, and then the crop yield responses will affect the land use decisions people are make. And then the land use decision and the fertilizer application decisions will further affect the nitrogen leachings and the environmental outcomes. So we fit those environmental outcomes into a hydrology model called PIM, which is developed by our colleagues at Penn State. So that's why they start with a PIM. And then the results of the PIM model, they will give us the results of the water budget. And then they will also give us the stream discharge and the nutrient concentrations, which will fit into a limnological model we call it general lakes model, which is developed by our colleagues from the limnology discipline. And then we bring together the limnology model with an economic model, which is developed by the economists in the team. We call it a hedonic property value model. So by this model, we can examine how does the water quality change will affect the housing property values around the lake. And I will talk further in my talk today. And then the outputs of the hedonic model will give us the water quality price premiums. The water quality price premiums will affect the civic engagement, like the people around the people who own the properties along the lake, and also a lot of them, they're members of the lake protection associations. And then they will potentially have some plans for land use policy change, which will further fit into our model of algal ecosystems. So the highlight of this entire project is why using the coupled human nature system approach to modeling the entire feedback process here. Of course, I cannot do it alone. I must. And I benefit a lot from the discussions and the collaborations within our teams. So this is the photo we take along the Lake Mendota, which is our study site in those papers. And I just want to shout out to the awesome researchers, students in our team, which we have a group of biological system engineer, economists, hydrologists, limnologists, biogeochemists, ecologists, and then social scientists. So we produce a lot of results in the papers, which I cannot tell within just this 1 hour. So what I'm going to tell you is the 2 papers I'm leading. And I'm also going to think about what this means in terms of the water policy perspectives. So here's the first paper. In the first paper, I'm going to link the perspectives or the relationship for land use and management decisions to the water qualities, and then to the ecosystem services we have. And then this model brings in the agricultural model and the economic modeling. And then we integrated these 2 models together, and then we have an integrated assessment model to model the whole process. The idea from this paper goes from the surface water pollution problem we have in the US. As you all know, nutrient pollution is the leading type of pollution we are facing in a lot of water bodies in the US. And mostly the nutrient pollution issue is caused by the agricultural runoffs. And then it will lead to the harmful algae blooms we have seen in the previous picture. There are significant economic impacts of nutrient pollution in terms of commercial and recreational fishery, in terms of the impact on housing market, which I will talk about later. And then it will affect the drinking water safety. This is the project I'm exploring right now. And thinking about the policy and the regulations we have. In the US, we have the Clean Water Act. So the Clean Water Act makes it very clear for point source, which is it's unlawful to discharge any pollutant unless a valid permit was obtained. But for nutrient pollution problem we have from the agriculture side, this is a non-point source issue. And for the Clean Water Act, they just provide funds to implement approved non-point source management programs. Why? Because regulating non-point source pollution is really hard. And it's difficult, first it's difficult to measure. And the second, it changes across time periods with the changing weather conditions. So in Florida, we have the total maximum daily load program, which is what we call TMDL. And then we have the incentives for people to adopt the best management practice. But unfortunately, if you follow some research in Florida, the adoption rate in Florida is pretty low for those management practices. And also, if we look at the benefits of US water quality policy, there's a famous paper in the econ part on this issue. It's like if you come in the US for any regulations, we need to do the cost-benefit analysis. But if you look at the benefit-cost ratio for different environmental policies, the results is actually surprising. For all the other regulations, drinking water, air, greenhouse gas, or others, we all have a larger than 1 of benefit-cost analysis results, which means they pass the benefit-cost analysis. But for surface water, the number is low. We only get the results of 0.79, which means we have more cost than the benefits in terms of the surface water regulations. Why? Why is that? This is the question I'm trying to figure out as an economist. And my answer is there is missing categories of benefits. for a lot of water policies, actually they have the co-benefits. The co-benefits is defined as the effects that are favorable to human welfare, but they are incidental to the regulation's intended target. So for water policies, if we think about the benefits related to water improvements, then this is the benefits. But if you think about the others, like the health benefit, like the reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, like the reductions in other non-water pollutants, this is what I'm calling the co-benefits. And why the co-benefits matters for the non-point source pollution we are thinking about. If we look at the nitrogen cycling with the agricultural production, here is why. So in the US, we use a lot of fertilizers in the agricultural production to boost the yield, especially for the production of corn. And as a side effect, the excess use of fertilizers will degrade the water quality through the nitrate leaching, and then this will cause the effects of eutrophication. This is what we have seen in Florida and in our other places. But at the same time, for the nutrient cycling, the fertilizers will also result in a large amount of greenhouse gas emissions in terms of nitrous oxide emissions. And if you think about the potential of those, the nitrous oxide emissions is 3 times larger than the carbon dioxide we have seen. So which means if those water policies, they could help us reduce fertilizer applications. They could have results in benefits, not only in terms of the water quality improvement, but also in terms of the reductions in the greenhouse gas emissions. And this is what I want to focus on in this paper. And from the perspective of an economist, the co-benefits is really important. If we do not account for those co-benefits, basically we will understate the social benefit of fertilizer use reductions. And then if we think about what's the optimal level of fertilizer applications, then which will drive a wedge between the regulated level and the socially optimal level. And also, if we account for those co-benefits, maybe potentially we could reverse the decisions from the benefit cost analysis, which will make it larger than 1. And so in this paper, what I'm doing is I'm using an integrated modeling framework to quantify the co-benefits. For this framework, I'm coupling an economic simulation model based on the optimization of profits. And then I'm coupling it with an agronomic model, which helps me to figure out the nitrogen cyclings, and then the relationship between the fertilizer applications and the crop yields in different crop rotation patterns. And the reason we want to link those 2 models together, because we do think the farmer decision-making, the crop yields, and the environmental outcomes, they are interconnected. So the yield responses will affect the farmer's decision-making, and then the farmer's decision-making will affect the crop yields, like the profit, and then the joint production of the environmental outcomes. So the contribution of this paper is like we are the first study to quantify the water quality co-benefits, and our results helps improve the understanding of the behavioral response to service water policy. So for the study site, like I mentioned before, the study site is Lake Mendota watershed in Wisconsin, which is a watershed mainly dominated by agriculture. 67% of total land area in the watershed is agriculture. And the water quality concerns there is mainly driven by the agricultural land use. So this is the photo my colleague take outside of the limnology department of UW Madison. And this is the picture of Lake Mendota. It's a eutrophic lake. But and then let's take a look about the land use changes in our simulation year, which is between 2003 and 2040. As you will see, the land use changes actually, they changed a lot in those 12 years, especially from the grassland to the corn productions. And as you will know, corn produce a lot of nitrogen leachings. And this is where the environmental concerns comes from. And here is our modeling framework. So for our modeling, we have 2 processes. The first is the calibration process. You can think about this is a process I'm using to calibrate the underlying decision parameters, like using the remote sensing data and other known information I have. And then after I getting the calibrated environmental parameters and the decision parameters, I can use it to simulate a list of potential water policies and thinking about what's the benefit and what's the cost in terms of monetary values. So for the calibration, I take into account the biophysical and the land use information from a variety of sources. And then our team feeds them into a cycles agro-ecosystem model. So this model can tell us the crop yield responses to different nitrogen applications, and I'm also fitting it with the IMB production function we have used in the agriculture economics literature to think about the plateau of yield and to take into account different crop rotations. And then after I get the crop yield responses, I'm feeding it into a constraint economic optimization model with a variety of economic information. The intuition is like by taking into account the yield responses, the changing crop prices across years, and also other information we could gather. Then at optimal, how would the farmers' decisions look like in terms of land allocations to different crops and crop rotations? And then how does the decision look like in the nitrogen applications for different crops? And also the cycles model can give us the calibrated environmental parameters. They will tell us under different nitrogen application scenarios, how does the nitrogen leaching response looks like, and how does the nitrous oxide emission results looks like. And then, sorry. The simulation process, using the calibrated decision and the environmental parameters, I'm feeding into a list of command and control water quality policies. And you can think about this to mimic the policies of TMDL, to think about what will happen if we have 20% reduction, we have 30% reduction in nitrogen leaching. And then I could simulate what's the producer's behavior adjustments, what's the regional nitrogen leaching levels, what's the regional emission levels. And with the consideration of the social cost of nitrogen, which I have been calculated for this watershed. You can think about it, this helps you to understand what's the dollar value of reduction of 1 unit in nitrogen leaching and emissions. And then after that, we get.
It's okay. Do you want a cough drop? I have one. I'll get one just in case. Go ahead.
Then after that, we can get the monetary value of those pollution reductions. And then we can calculate the benefit, the cost ratio. So the benefit of the water policies is like what's the economic values of those reductions. And the cost is the cost to farmers. Like if they change land use, what will be the cost to them? And then here is our results. So this is the statistical results we have. As you will see, across different years, the continuous corn rotation, which means they keep producing corn every year, has the largest amount of leaching and emissions. And then the results actually varies across years due to different weather conditions. But also, as you will see, the emission levels is there. And then in terms of the impact for different water quality and the percentage of leaching reductions, here is the behavioral adjustments. As you will see, for the behavioral adjustments, we will see if we increase the leaching reductions, which means if we have like a higher target for nitrogen leaching reductions, the continuous corn rotation, the land acreage will keep decreasing. But for the corn soybean, they will increase and then decrease. For the corn alfalfa rotation, they will decrease. And then if we pass certain leaching reduction levels, farmers need to start to fallow their land to fulfill the requirements. So just a side background, we model the 3 crop rotations in this model. The continuous corn, the corn soybean, which means you plant corn and soybean and corn and soybean. And the corn alfalfa is like a 6-year crop rotations, which means you have 3 years of corn and then followed by 3 years of alfalfa. So we choose these 3 rotations based on the remote sensing image we have seen in this region. And then in terms of the behavioral adjustment of nitrogen applications, as you will see, actually didn't change a lot. So our message is that to fulfill the requirements of certain water policies, especially a large reduction levels, land use decision, which is what we call extensive match, what made it driving the results. And then if we look at the pollution levels at different water policy levels, you will see the continuous corn actually drives the total numbers of nitrogen deletion. This makes sense according to the agronomic information we have. And also, but I want to highlight that actually the amount of nitrous oxide emission reductions is large across those different scenarios. And that's why if we look at the monetary values, and this is the same scale, the benefits of leaching reduction actually is far less than the benefits from nitrous oxide part. Mainly because it's the social cost of nitrous oxide emissions is far larger than the social cost of nitrogen leaching. And then what we find is like the co-benefits from nitrous oxide mitigation is actually 20 times larger than the benefits from reducing nitrogen leaching. The reason is like the social benefits of greenhouse gas reductions actually happens at global scale. And the benefits of nitrogen leaching sometimes is a local scale. So if you think about the global scale benefit versus local scale benefit, that's why we can see the social cost of carbon or greenhouse gas emissions is higher. But of course, the benefits of current water quality policy is potentially underestimated if we take into account the reductions of greenhouse gas emission part. So if we take into that, we could potentially reverse the benefit cost analysis. And also we found out the co-benefits vary substantially across years. This is mainly driven by the variations in weather conditions, especially for precipitation. And also we think this is why there's a possible explanation on the low BMB adoption rates. So if for the BMB subsidy, if we just thinking about the water benefit is low, but if we can bring those, we now we have a carbon market. If we can let the farmers sell those credits from their BMB adoption in the global carbon market, maybe this can give them some incentives to adopt those best management practices. So this is the first paper I'm going to talk about. So second paper I'm going to talk about is like, okay, for local people, for lakefront homeowners, how does water quality change mean to them and what's the economic values of it? And then in this paper, I'm mainly looking into the real estate markets to analyze the economic benefits. And in this paper, I'm bringing the limnology model with the economic model. The policy context of this paper is also the TMDL and the non-point source water pollutions. But in this paper, we want to highlight that for those TMDLs, for those policies, they often target nutrient loadings. But then for people who perceive the water quality benefits, they usually look at the water qualities at the lake. So we need to have a translation from the nutrient loadings to the water qualities, because this is what people perceive when they make decisions. So basically, this paper is trying to build a modeling tool which can help to link the linkage between the policy target, the nutrient loadings to the lake, and the policy outcomes, and which we're thinking about the economic benefits of improved water quality. So basically, this paper just did two things. Did one thing, which we coupled in the lake water quality model and the economic property value model to provide the understanding of the two linkages. The first linkage is from nutrient loading to water quality. The second linkage is from the water quality to economic consequences in terms of property value change and the property tax change at the local government. And this is our framework. To modeling the relationship between the nutrient loading changes and the water quality change, we use a general lake model to model it. And then we feed those results into a hedonic property value model to considering the property prices change. And then we use the local tax rate to consider the annual property tax change. The annual property tax change will potentially affect the local policies because it will affect the funding sources. And then which would potentially change the TMDL policy. And still, this paper is working on Lake Mendota watershed. The reason we choose that because we have plenty of data on it. This is the most studied lake in the world. For our lake water quality model, I'm not an expert on that, so I'm trying to just explain it. This is totally done by my colleagues from the limnology department. And you can think about this is a model which takes into account a variety of factors which will affect lake water quality. According to my conversations of them, they have more than 300 variables embedded in their model. And what we are doing is like, we take their model, but we just change the input of the inflow of nitrogen leachings. And then we take a look about how the results looks like in terms of water quality. And then we take into account different scenarios. We take into account 8 scenarios with both nutrient loading increases and nutrient loading decreases. And for those lake models, they have more than 300 of input data. But for the output data, we are considering 2 water quality dimensions. The first is the Saki depth. For the Saki depth, basically is a measurement about the water clarity. And we use this measurement because this is close to people can perceive in reality. But also we take into account another water dimensions, which is the surface chlorophyll A concentrations, because this can help us to mimic the growth of algae blooms and then see the impacts about algae blooms on economic decisions. And then the hedonic property value model. So the intuition is like, if you think about this is a lake which is clean and blue, but after many years of land use and agricultural productions in the region, the lake becomes green and there's a lot of algae inside. And then thinking about the same properties in the lakes, the property value will decrease because of the decrease in the water quality. The reason is if you think about the market of lakefront properties, a lot of people go there during summers, especially in Wisconsin, to enjoy the view of the lakes. So they do have a higher rent to pay if the lake water quality is better. But of course, for housing markets, there are so many things we need to take into account. So that's why you will see we take into account a variety of factors which will affect the housing market and the housing sales prices. And this is the maps we have for the housing market in the Lake Mendota watershed. So as an output of our hedonic property value model, what we can get, the water quality price premiums for in terms of both the Saki depths and the surface chlorophyll A. And our intuition is that the Saki depth, the increase of Saki depths will increase the water quality price premium, while the decrease of surface chlorophyll A will increase the premium because of better water quality. And here is our results. And for all the lakefront properties in the region, we found out if we have 25% decrease in the nutrient loadings to the lakes, a 25 increase in the nutrient loadings to the lakes, which will cause a decrease of property values in terms of 5 million. But then a decrease in the nutrient loading will increase the property values of 6 million. As you will see, actually this is not symmetric. The reason is Lake Mendota is a pretty eutrophic lake. And then the improvement actually will bring more benefits than the keep decrease the water quality levels. And then here is the annual tax revenues we calculated for the city of Madison and the city of Middleton, which is 2 cities along the Lake Mendota region. The take-home message is that under the setting of a highly eutrophic lake like Lake Mendota, we find out the effects of an increase in nutrient loadings and a decrease in nutrient loadings that are actually not symmetric. The economic consequences of a decrease in water quality are smaller than the potential gains from improvement. And we feel like the starting state of the lake will influence the economic consequence from policy scenarios. And then that's why right now I'm working on to expand my models to a variety of lakes with different starting states in the US. Now, I've talked too much about Wisconsin. I'm in Florida now. How about Florida? So the short answer is I'm working on it. And hopefully after several years, I can tell you my results. But this is just my second semester at Florida. So I'm still in my first year. But I'm so amazed to find out the Florida stakeholders and the Florida scientists, they really care about our environment and the ecosystem services we perceive. So I'm in a work group of the Florida Climate Smart Agriculture Working Group. A topic we have talked a lot in this working group is what's the value or what's the ecosystem services we have in Florida. And then this is what I'm going to work on in the next few years to quantify the ecosystem services and then to estimate the economic values of it. And then I also want to shout out to the Florida Lake Watch program and thanks so much for Mark to providing us with the data and everything we need. So doing this kind of research requires a lot of data, but I was amazed to find Mark has like 30 years of data for Lake Watch program. And also it across different counties in Florida. So my next paper will definitely be about what's the housing market premiums of water quality improvements in Florida. So hopefully I can tell you more in the future. So that's it. Thank you so much. And feel free to let me know if you have any questions. We want to send a for funding and the CNHS colleagues to support all our analysis and of course the LTER network for all the data.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Wang. So we'll go to the room for any questions and then I'll check the YouTube here. So let's start in the room. Any questions for Dr. Wang?
Do you know if in your Florida database, are there any lakes that have increased in water quality?
So the question for everyone online is, do you think there are any lakes in Florida that have actually improved in water quality if you're going to do this analysis?
That's a great question. I just get the data. I haven't taken a close look at it, but I think we can, even if there's no data, we can do some simulations like they're seeing like the what if scenarios and what happens.
I've got a question all the way back at the top. The idea that the surface water benefit cost ratio is less than 1. And which of course is just sort of shocking and appalling, right? But then the drinking water benefit cost ratio was like 4 to 1. How isn't drinking water in many regions a co-benefit of surface water? So like, how do you, seems like that's a no-brainer as a co-benefit, and nitrous oxide emissions, yeah, great, it's sort of more out of the box, but how about just incorporating drinking water as a co-benefit of surface water?
That's an excellent question, and that's what I'm working on right now. Yes, like we are thinking about how we can link the surface water and the drinking water. So one project I'm currently doing, like, to thinking about the drinking water quality, especially I think for the public water systems, we already have the Safe Drinking Water Act. It's been done, the data is there. But the question about the drinking water is like, how about private wells? Like, how about so there's no regular sampling of private wells. So to figure this question out, we need to think about the connection between surface water and the drinking water, especially for the private well side. So currently, I just get the data from Florida DEP about their sampling results of the drinking water. So I'm analyzing it right now. Yes, I do believe. Yeah, why? yes, the drinking water and the surface water, they're connected. We should also sync them together. Thanks, David.
Thanks for the presentation. I was just thinking, while considering all these models, do you even take into account the qualitative aspect of what would trigger these decisions for novel policies, or and in case if you did, what was the approach towards integrating qualitative data from model?
So excellent question. Personally, I didn't take that, but our team do take a look at it. So we take a look at it by working with the lake associations. So we work with the lake sanitary lake associations, which they keep a long record about, like they have newspapers and a lot of writings about the qualitative data we have. So our social scientists in the team, actually we have a math students, they spent, I think, 1 or 2 summers in the lake sanitary lake sanitary protection associations to study their records and to think about how the local communities think about the water quality trends. So I think the method they are using, I cannot speak for them, but I heard about their presentations. The method they are using is like they get all the data from the newspapers, newsletters, and everything, and then they put in a database. They do a test analysis and then see how it links together. And I think we have a master dissertation about that. I can send to you if you want.
Thank you.
Mark.
Yeah, maybe I missed it, but how were you evaluating the benefits in that first paper? What were the measures that you used?
Good question. So for the first paper, for the social cost of nitrous oxide emissions, actually, I just used the data from EPA. So in last year, September 2022, EPA just released a new document about the social cost of greenhouse gas emissions. And the new results actually is almost 3 times higher than the last results. So I just directly used the data from.
What is it?
$1 million per kilogram of global warming potential or
How do they
something, right?
measure
Yeah.
$1 million?
Right.
That's the question.
So I think the EPA and I think a lot of people, they have like, including Bill Nordhaus, which is the Nobel Prize winner of economics several years ago. They have like integrated assessment model called DICE model and other models. Basically, they take into account the health impacts, the agricultural impact, all kind of different sector impacts, and then to think about what's the social cost of greenhouse gas. DICE, I think, is what. And then for the water quality part, actually, I want to mention that is there's no ready-to-use social cost of nitrogen leaching in the US, I think globally as well. So Cassie Klein from Cornell University is leading a project which with EPA and with Dan Fnaff, with David Kaiser, a lot of famous economists. They are leading a project to try to provide the social cost of water pollution. But we look at it. I'm also in the workshop. It's hard because it's actually case by case. It's like for water quality benefits, it's pretty local. And it depends on the stakeholders you are thinking about, depends on like the different ecosystem service you are quantifying, the results varies. So for my paper, I'm using the same method, which with Bonnie Keeler, which is published in the social cost in Science Advances, that the paper is called the social cost of nitrogen. So I use their method and adjust it to the Lake Mendota watershed. But one thing they didn't include it in the current analysis is the health benefit. So that's why I'm working with the health economists in our department to try to quantify the health benefit of nitrogen reduction.
We have a question from YouTube from Shaler. He says, obviously the housing market went up in the COVID years. Did you run a model to show how much water quality would be worth during the COVID versus pre-COVID years?
That's a great question. So my paper published before COVID. So the results I'm talking about is all before COVID.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be an interesting question to actually look at how does the COVID affect the housing market. But my intuition is like, although we don't have COVID in our time period, but we have financial crisis in our time periods. So basically you can think about this as a structural break. And then you can think about how this structural break affect the housing market in total. But then our comparison of the housing market is like, we compare the lakefront property versus non-lakefront property. So in a same period, they are actually in the same market. So we would, yes, the short answer is yes, we can take into account that in our model.
When you're talking about lakefront properties, are you talking about like residential communities with artificial lakes, or more so like these natural lakes and like summer homes?
So for the paper I'm talking about, for lakefront properties, we identified it as a single family houses, which has a direct view of the lakes. The reason, and also we identify those properties, the criteria is like they must have a arm's length transactions, which means they have a market prices for us to work on. So the reason we choose the single family house market is because it's the most like popular family unit in the US, and it's also we take into a majority of them are there for summer vacations. And of course, we can use apartments data, but I just feel like there's a lot of chaos and a lot of variables need to control in other kinds of properties. And this is also the best practice in our field. It's like just use the single family houses, then take into account arm's length transactions, which means like if it's in you get the property from your grandma, we will not take it into account in our data set.
But I think it's a good point for Florida, where so much of the quote unquote lakefront or waterfront property is on like artificial canals or artificial
yeah.
stormwater features. And so your study was a case on Lake Mendota, a large natural lake, right? But applying it broadly across lakes or across water features. And I think, you know, Mark Clark would surely know, there's been some work on, the marginal increase in prices from water quality, water features in Florida is like a major thing, right? Are you from Florida?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, there's like a factor. I can see like the algae blooms and whatnot, so I'm thinking about consideration for houses.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'll put it on my to-do list.
I think one point that you made from the crop reduction versus meeting the the command and control policy, and then what is the outcome? Is it like a change in the nutrient leaching from practice change or from land use change? And you said you found that if you want to meet any of these goals, it has to be land use change, which, I mean, just to say it plainly, to meet the load reduction, you needed to convert agriculture out of the system.
Well,
this is your finding?
Well, I want to actually correct a little bit. So what we found out is like if you want to meet a larger reduction of like those leachings, like you must take ag out. But for those small reduction, like 5-10%, you can achieve it by first reduce certain fertilizer applications, and then second, change your crop rotations, which means you change from continuous corn to corn soybean or to corn alfalfa. And I want to say one thing we didn't take into account is the cover crop. We didn't explicitly model it in our cover crop. But if you think about it, and my intuition is like for small reductions, if you use some cover crops, then you can also achieve the target. So just want to correct it.
I mean, it's a finding that we have also here. I mean, if the TMDL says you need to reduce loading by 50, 60, 70%, it's very hard to meet with even the most creative best management practice. So that's a finding in Florida that I think models very well or maps very well to what you found in Wisconsin.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah. All right. Oh, one more question from Peter on YouTube. Do you think, this is a tough one, do you think the naturally high levels of tannins and vegetation in a lot of Florida lakes will affect your model?
Oh, that's really a hard one. And so when I was thinking about Florida's problems, and I'm trying to see if I can use my model in Florida, a deep thinking or a detailed thinking makes me hesitate. And I think I need to adjust my model. So as you will see, in my model, I just consider corn, soybean, and alfalfa. But Florida, we have more than 300 crops, and a lot of them are specialty crops. And each specialty crops, they have different irrigation patterns. They have different fertilizer, pest management applications. And depending on where you are, the natural leaching levels will be different. So I don't want to say this is hopeless, but I just want to say it takes time. I need to think further about it, and especially for different specialty crops, the measurement practice is totally different.
There was one point in that paper, I think was quite relevant, that some of these lakes are have very high tannin levels, it might be stones, things like that. And so second disc may not be a very good measure, but you would still get not necessarily algae, but duckweed.
Great question. So another thing actually we are thinking about after we publish the paper is like, is there anything people perceive but cannot be captured with Saki or chlorophyll A? Apparently there's a lot, but then a major question we have in our field is like, when we talk about water quality in different places, what are we referring to? Actually, I did a paper in Oneida Lake, which is in New York because I was in New York before. Actually, I found out the housing premium of water quality actually related to the fishery growth. If you think about Oneida is like a mainly fishery lakes. If you think about fishery growth, we don't see no nutrient. We need certain nutrient for fishery to growth, and for different species, the nutrient like requirement may be different. So if you think about what are people valuing when they think about lakes, Saki, water clarity may be one, but also for fishery lakes, maybe the fish abundance because they want to catch walleye at Oneida lakes, and in Florida they may be different. So that's why I found out there are more questions than answers. But also as a researcher, I'm excited because there are more things we could do.
Yeah. All right, thank you, Dr. Wang. Let's give one more round of applause. Let's see, we'll see you all next week. It's not spring break yet, so next Wednesday, and then we'll have a break after that. Make sure you're turning in your summaries. And is that Dr. Clark's sheet from last week? Can you flip it over? And if you're in your Dr. Clark section, you can sign in, okay? All right, thanks everyone. Thanks everyone on YouTube and on Zoom. We will see you later.